I was listening to a great podcast between Rich Roll and Tim Ferriss on the Tim Ferriss podcast. If you know him, he's big on personal development. Rich Roll has an amazing story. If you don't know him, he's got a great podcast of his own. But he was, essentially an alcoholic. His life was going down the tubes. Turned ultra marathoner, turned vegan, turned amazing podcaster, best-selling author, so on and so forth. And he's got 500 plus episodes on his show where he talks about running and racing and biking and things like that. He talks about veganism, which that's not my jam personally, but pretty interesting stuff. Talks a lot about spirituality and yoga and just overall self improvement, which I love. So he had him on the show, and they were talking about Rich's training for endurance races, and he talked about phase 2 training. And so I'm no expert of this, but I have done some races, and I'm actually training for one this year as well. And the concept behind zone 2, I think it's zone 2 or phase 2. Clearly, I'm not an expert, but he's talking about zone 2. And essentially, there's a few different zones for your heart rate, right? Like zone 1 is you're listening to this podcast. I'm just sitting here, right? It's just kind of like your resting heart rate. And then as you go up, I think zone 3 or 4 is where you're like pumping it. You're doing sprints, or you've got a ton of weight that you're pushing, or something that's really accelerating your heart rate, right? It's really intense. And zone 2 is, if you've ever jogged or biked or anything, but you could still talk to someone, right? You're still at a conversational pace, they'd call it. And the whole point of this is that if you're training for an endurance type of an event physically, you want to be in zone 2 as much as possible. I think 85% of the time, roughly. And so what that feels like is that it's not really a push. It doesn't really feel that hard. You might even get done with that 45-hour long run and feel like you left a lot in the tank, and you're maybe not sweating as much as you think you should have, or your legs aren't burning like you think they should be. And the mistake that a lot of people make is that they start to push it more, right? And so they start to go harder. And that doesn't build up the aerobic capacity that you need to complete an endurance event. Let's say if you're running a marathon or ultra marathon or anything like that. And so the best way to do it is to spend longer periods of time, but under that shorter tension. And I thought that's interesting, not only physically, but mentally, right? When we're thinking about our years and how we're going to play this year out in 2022, the mistake that I've made before in the past, and if you're an ambitious young person or not young person, but an ambitious person that's getting after it, you might have the tendency to put too much on your plate. You go ham for a couple days, weeks, maybe months, and then you hit a wall. And then it's May 12th and you're burnt out and you got over half the year left. You're like, shit, I got to figure something out. I need to go to Hawaii for a couple days. And that buys you a couple months. And you're kind of playing this game where you're giving and taking a little bit, but you already used up a lot of your reserves early on because you're in the quote unquote zone 3 or zone 4, getting after it maybe too hard off the bat. So I'm starting to think maybe zone 2 is the place to be when we're thinking about how we want to span the 365 days of the year. And there will be times where you got to go up to zone 3 or 4, right? There's end of quarter, end of month, perhaps. The weeks where you're leading up to a vacation or you're going to be out or something's going on where, you got to put in extra work. Maybe you have a big life event coming up and you just had a kid or you just bought a house, and there's days and weeks where it's like, man, my life is crazy. And you got to pull out all the stops that week. I'm not saying, hey, you're going through a tough time and let's just give up, right? Or you just had a kid or just got married or just bought a house and, I'm not going to help move. My spouse, my significant other can do all the work because I got a sales job. Or, hey, I'm not going to do any work and I'm just going to worry about the move and I'm going to let everything slip. It's neither of those. It's understanding that there are going to be times for those sprints, but 80-20 rule. 80% of the time, we got to be going in that 1% better type of mentality. What are the few things that I can do today that are going to set me up for that long term success? Um, and how do I go at a consistent rate for all the things that matter, the big money, things that need to get done, right? The prospecting that you need to do every day, right? The follow ups that you need to do, the pipeline touches, things like that. Um, you're better off doing, let's just call it 10 prospecting emails a day consistently. That's not a lot. And I'm really just kind of throwing out random numbers, but you're better doing that 10 than doing, none for a month and then 50 every single day for the next month. You're going to wear yourself out that way, right? It's better to do, I'm going to do 10. And if for some reason you get to do 20 that day because you had extra time or you were feeling it, you were in a rhythm, great, you went above and beyond. But here's my minimum. Here's my fundamental benchmark standard. I'm not going to go below this. I'm not going to go below the 10. And then we're going to keep building up from there. That's the way to be in the zone too, I think.